Badger fans, is Tanner Mordecai getting underrated this year? Let's talk about that and the rise of Braelon Allen. I think he's going to pass some big time names in Badger history this season. We're going to talk about that and more on today's Locked On Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome, as always, to Locked On Badgers, and what a time to be alive. We're going to talk about the Badgers offense, Tanner Mordecai. I appreciate every single person for tuning into the show. If you're getting it on YouTube, if you're listening on the podcast, wherever it is, however it is, wherever you're listening or watching, thank you so much for allowing us and myself to be a small part of your day. It means the world to me. All right, let's talk about this now. So, as you know, we've put some polls up on the show previously. The Locked On Network has done surveys of the best basketball program, football program, head coach. And I think it's nice to get some of these outside voices into the show. It keeps, like, we're a Badger fan base, right? And we're doing this thing together. And it's really easy to get stuck in our silo, right? To be very hyper-focused on what the Badgers are doing and where they're at. It's good to get some outside voices at times. So let's talk about a couple polls that I just recently saw. This one is the top 5 Big Ten offenses. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see this. This is a poll conducted across the Locked On Network. If you're listening on the podcast, I'm just going to read it out. They have Michigan number 1. This is the top 5 Big Ten offenses for the upcoming season. So they have Michigan number 1, Ohio State number 2, Penn State number 3, Maryland number 4, Wisconsin number 5, your Badgers number 5. Let's just pause there for a second. How exciting is it, Badger fans? How exciting is it to see a poll talking about the best offenses in the Big Ten and have the Badgers near the top, right? Up near the top of that list. It's incredible, right? That's why I start off the show with what a time to be alive. Incredible. Who would have thought that would happen a year ago or 2 years ago? You look at the last 3 years of the Badgers offenses, you're talking the 7th, 8th, 9th ranked unit in the Big Ten. People are thinking top 5 next year, right? And I don't think any of us think that's outlandish. You're not going to have a better offense in Michigan. You're not going to have a better offense in Ohio State. But aside from that, Maryland has a dynamic quarterback coming back. Penn State's interesting, a great running back in Singleton. I always have weapons on the outside. But 5th in the Big Ten, that's if they finish with the 5th best offense in the Big Ten, Badger fans, they're going to win a ton of games. But what's interesting to me, and if you notice, the title of my first segment is Mordecai is underrated. Well, how can Mordecai be underrated if the Badgers have the 5th best offense in the Big Ten? Well, he's underrated because if you look at this next poll, right, this is the Big Ten's top 5 quarterbacks. Mordecai's not listed on this. It goes J.J. McCarthy, number 1, fair. Then Drew Aller, number 2. He's the super incredibly highly recruited kid, 5-star player. But he's never proven anything. Then you have Tagovailoa for Maryland, number 3. Kyle McCord, a new starter for Ohio State at number 4. And then you have Cade McNamara at number 5, the Michigan transfer going over to Iowa. This is where I think Tanner Mordecai gets underrated. Again, if you're on YouTube, you can see this listing. I put it up. If you're listening on the podcast, here it is again, according to Locked On. These are the top 5 projected starting quarterbacks in the Big Ten. J.J. McCarthy, Drew Aller, Tala Tagovailoa, Kyle McCord, and Cade McNamara. 2 of those guys are first-time starters, and Cade McNamara is not better than Tanner Mordecai. I'm sorry. Cade McNamara is not better than Tanner Mordecai. He is not. And this is where, again, Tanner Mordecai, I think, is getting underrated. It's getting underrated in the sense that if you think Wisconsin has a top 5 offense, then Tanner Mordecai is one of the better quarterbacks in the Big Ten, period. Because they're not going to have that offense in Phil Longo's system if Mordecai's not slinging it around. You can't have one without the other, is my point. You can't think the locomotive is going to go really, really fast, but not think the steam engine powering that locomotive is very strong, right? The quarterback is the engine of the offense. If you think the offense is going to be one of the best in the Big Ten, conversely, you have to think that Tanner Mordecai is going to be the engine of that unit. Let's talk about McNamara. Cade McNamara going to Iowa. You look at what he's done. He's never thrown for the yardage that Mordecai has. He's never thrown for the yards per attempt that Mordecai has. He also, like Tanner Mordecai, doesn't have an exceptional touchdown to interception ratio. Mordecai's better. And people will say, well, McNamara did what he did in the Big Ten. So you got to give him that credit. Yeah, but he did what he did in the Big Ten with Big Ten weapons, right? He did what he did in the Big Ten with Harbaugh and with Michigan weapons and Michigan offensive linemen and Michigan running games. What Tanner Mordecai did was with SMU weapons And he had a NFL receiver. I guarantee you the rest of that talent on that SMU team did not line up with what McNamara was playing with at Michigan. So it goes both ways. Yes, McNamara has proven it in this conference, but he also had better weapons, right? So I think it's super exciting, right, that Wisconsin has a potentially top 4, top 5 offense in the Big Ten. Like, what a time to be alive. I talked about it. Like, this is happening. There's still moments I wake up, right, because I've been a Badger fan for decades of my life at this point, and there's still moments I wake up, and it's just incredible to me that the Badgers are where they are, that Phil Longo has injected this enthusiasm into the program, right? I think it will be a top 5 offense in the Big Ten. I don't think that's outlandish. It could be top 4, top 3 offense in the Big Ten. I don't think it's going to crack the top 2, but I think top 3 isn't insane. And if that's the case, again, Mordecai's not going to be a middle-of-the-pack Big Ten quarterback. I think he's an upper-tier Big Ten quarterback who does have turnover issues, potentially, decision-making issues, potentially. But if you remember, we did an interview with one of the beat writers for SMU, and he just said, this dude is so tough. All he cares about is winning, and he's got an NFL arm. Right there, that's 3 pretty big intangible things you can check the box on for Mordecai. So I think he's being underrated. They're putting him behind quarterbacks who haven't proven anything, and I get it. A 5-star pedigree matters. The last Ohio State quarterback that hasn't been great is, I don't even know, right? So you assume Kyle McCord will be great for Ohio State, but you don't know. Mordecai's at least proven it. I would have Mordecai above McNamara and at least in the top 5. All right, we're going to take a break there, come back. We're going to talk about the rise of Braelon Allen, who he might pass this year if he has the type of year I think he's going to. Plus, what would it take for Tanner Mordecai to have a top 10 passing season, or to crack the top 10 in career passing yardage at Wisconsin? Is that possible in 1 year? And how far could Chimere Dike rise up on the all-time receiving list after this year as well? We're going to talk about some potential milestones coming up on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show over at FanDuel. I've talked about FanDuel. Baseball is in full effect. It's a great time to run over there, hit a grand slam with America's #1 sports book. And right now, new customers, you get that no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 back. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. Listen, I've talked about it. You guys still have time to jump on my futures train where we're going Niners, Suns, Braves, all of them winning the title. We're going to parlay it together. We're going to celebrate the riches together. I know I had some comments telling me the Suns aren't going to win the finals. They don't have depth, yada, 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 yada. What they do have is 3 top 35 players in the NBA and DeAndre Ayton with a new coach who's going to focus on the defense. Listen, they're going to find ring chasers. They'll find a PJ Tucker. They'll find a Stanley Johnson. The Niners, I trust in that defense, and the Braves are just on a tear. So I'm going to parlay those 3 in FanDuel. Futures bets, all winning the title. Run it with me. Trust me, you're not going to regret it. All right, let's keep going here. I do want to say thank you to everybody who tuned in the show, everybody who watches the show. Y'all are amazing. Thank you so much. All right, let's talk about Braelon Allen. I don't think Braelon Allen's weird to me because I don't think he is getting the credit he deserves among the annals of Badgers running backs. Right? Like his first year, he averaged 6+ yards per carry on a team that was wholly dependent on him. Last year, you're talking about a broken offense, a disjointed passing game, a coaching jambalaya, his 3rd running backs coach in 3 years, or his 2nd running backs coach, it's just a mess. He had a running backs coach who had no business, again, all due respect to Al Johnson, no business coaching running backs at Wisconsin, and he still put up 1,200 yards. Like this guy is a monster. Like Braelon Allen is a monster. Okay. And I really don't think he gets the credit he deserves. People talk about, oh, he's dancing too much. He's trying to avoid injury. Yeah, he's dancing too much because there's 9 people on the line of scrimmage, right? Like there's always somebody in his face. He's got no clean lanes to run through. Yeah, he's running to avoid some hits because he's taking a ton of them, right? And he's still a young kid. Like this is a 3rd-year player, and he's still going to be younger than a lot of starting running backs in the Big Ten, right? So I think he's going to have a monster year. Let's talk about some of the players and what do we expect from him. So I expect Braelon, if he's averaged about 1,200 yards a season, right? About 1,200. I think 1,300 is reasonable this year. I think he's going to have higher efficiency, less carries, could all equal out to be about the same amount of yards. Let me know in the comments how many yards you think Braelon's going to go for this year. Let's just say he goes for 1,200 again. Okay. He goes for 1,200. He's going to end up at about 37-10 career. That's 8th all time in Badger history, folks. 8th all time in Badger history. Think about the running backs in the history of the Wisconsin Badgers. Braelon Allen just puts up another year like he's done. He's going to be 8th all time. That's going to pass up Rufus Ferguson, the Roadrunner, right? It's going to pass up Corey Clement, great Badgers running back, Terrell Fletcher, Brett Moss, that dynamic duo, Billy Merrick. And it's going to put him right behind PJ Hill and James White. If he gets 1,500 yards, 1,506 actually, he'll pass James White and he'll get into 6 all time. Like, that's the type of territory with a great year Braelon Allen can get to, 6 all time. And now I don't think he's going to get 1,506 yards, right? I think that's unrealistic given how we're going to throw the ball around. I know Ches is going to get touches. Phil Longo's not going to want to ride Braelon into the ground. So I think 12 to 13, as long as he stays healthy, is probably reasonable. And again, 12 to 13, he's right in that 8th, 7th spot in Badger history, which is incredible. Top 10 running back career yardage in Wisconsin history. Again, just look. Sometimes we only focus at the names at the top of the list. Look at the names he passes to get to 8th. Corey Clement, Fletcher, Moss. Billy Merrick, Rufus Ferguson. Just monsters, all monsters. So I think he's going to have an incredible year. I think he's underrated nationally. I don't think he's gotten to show the full capability of what he can do because the offense has just really kind of chained him down. I can't wait to see him running against lighter boxes, against defenders who are more worried about Phil Longo's passing game. I think he's going to gash him. I can't wait. I think all the talk about Longo, all the talk about Mordecai, all the talk about the receivers, all the talk about the air raid. I think at the end of the year, the storyline is Braelon Allen's a monster, and he is so, so good. And it was great to see him run against teams that couldn't load up against him. I think that's one of the 2 or 3 storylines from the end of the year for the Badgers offense. Assuming he stays healthy, but that's true for everybody, right? That's true for everybody. So I think he's in for a monster season. Let's talk Mordecai for a second. So again, this is a low bar, but when we start looking at career leaders for Wisconsin passing yardage, right? Could Mordecai crack the top 10 in Wisconsin history in one season? It's possible. Now, he would need Mordecai, for reference, has averaged around 3,500 passing yards a season. Okay. Phil Longo's quarterbacks have put up a lot of yards as well. So if Mordecai has, let's say, a career year, he throws for, let's say, 4,000 yards, which would be a lot, right? But it's not that far off of his career average. It would put him right outside the top 10, right? 4,000 yards would realistically put him about 11th or 12th. If he gets 4,500 yards, he's jumping into the top 10 all time off one season. That just speaks to, again, we all know this, the lack of historic passing game at Wisconsin. So 10th right now is Jim Sorgi. If Mordecai were to somehow put up about 4,500 yards, he would jump in the 10th spot. It's likely if he just does what he's been doing, if Mordecai puts up a Tanner Mordecai type of a season, a Phil Longo type of a season, he's going to finish as like the 11th leading passer in Badgers history. Not in single seasons, right? In Badgers history off one year. That just tells you how far behind our passing game has been historically. Another interesting one to me was Chimere Dike. If he can put up the receiving yards this year are going to be really interesting, right? Because they're going to be spread out between Pauling, Williams, Dike, Lewis. I'm sure I'm missing one in my head already. Skylar Bell's in there. We haven't even talked about Green. It's going to be really hard to figure out where those yardage totals get split up. We're going to do a whole show on it, by the way. But let's say Dike puts up a career year, gets 700-800 yards. 800 yards would put, and this might surprise people. Dike gets 800 yards. That would put him 10th all time in Badger history. It would bump him ahead of Alex Erickson, Pat Richter, Jonathan Orr. So Dike is slowly crawling up that list too. I think this year, realistically, he's probably going to be about 500 or 600 yards. But even that puts him in the top, 15-ish all time in Badger history. So he's creeping up that list as well. There's a lot of offensive milestones that are going to be interesting to track, not just this year, but in the coming 3-4, however long Phil Longo and this staff and this setup is here, right? You're going to see passing records, receiving records, offensive records. You're going to see a lot of things start to fall at Wisconsin, not rushing records, right? Because those will be the ones that remain carved in granite at Wisconsin. But the other ones, you're going to see a lot of those milestones start to fall. And this year, again, you're going to see some rushing milestones fall because I think I think Braylon's just going to have a gigantic season where he really shows the true breadth of what he is on the football field, which is he's a bully on the football field in all the good ways. Like he is bigger, faster, stronger than the people you're going to put in front of him to try to tackle him. And I think now with more help around him, you're going to see the full efficiency of what he can do. So I think he's going to finish the season as a top 10 all-time rusher at Wisconsin and really kind of put his name into that pantheon of great Badger running backs that we talk about. That 30 years from now, I sit around a campfire on the beach with my kids and I say, I saw him. I saw Braylon run, right? Kids, you have no idea. I saw Braylon, right? I think he's going to be one of those type of running backs because I can already do that with Melvin. With James White and Ball and Gordon, I could. Those are going to be campfire players. Campfire players are the ones you talk about in hushed tones, right? With a fire going on and your kids around you, and you tell of the lore of the greats. Melvin Gordon. I saw Melvin. I saw 408. Monty Ball. I saw 39 touchdowns. Right. Braylon can get into that conversation. He's not going to statistically top those guys, but he has that type of physical presence and that type of uniqueness that puts him into rarefied air. And I think this season we're going to finally see some of that. All right, we're going to take a quick break away from campfire players. Put it in the comments. Who are a couple of your campfire players that 30 years from now, you're going to talk to your kids, your grandkids, some random dude on the bus, whatever it is, and say, I saw this guy play and he was special. I'm curious who those campfire players are for other fans. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to talk about a player entering the portal, not coming in, going out, and which Big Ten team is fast becoming a thorn in Wisconsin's side. We're going to talk about that next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show. All right, welcome back to Locked On Badgers. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, y'all are amazing. This community we're building is incredible. I love the Discord. I love everything we're doing. So just thank you so much for everybody. I really can't say it enough. All right, let's talk Marcus Allen. I meant to bring this up the other day. I forgot to, but Marcus Allen has officially entered the portal. Receiver. Not a huge shocker, to be honest, right? I think everybody saw this coming. And frankly, the biggest surprise was probably how long it took. Marcus is a guy who essentially quit on the team last year, entered the portal. I'm a big fan of players' movement, the ability to choose your fate, to kind of decide your future. But I don't know if he handled the transfer the best and then decided he was going to transfer to Minnesota of all places. Jack Sitchie definitely had a certain response to that. He decided he wanted to come back, right? Luke Fickell came aboard, Phil Longo. They said, yeah, come on back. But it never really separated himself in practice. And then he had some off the field issues. We're not going to get into that. You can certainly Google it. So he has officially entered the portal. And just a reminder again that you never know, right? You never know. Marcus Allen was a big time recruiting get, high 3-star, low 4-star guy, was initially committed to Michigan. When they pulled him in, we thought that was the next guy, right? That was a physical specimen that you just don't get very often. And you just never know. You never know in recruiting. You never know about fit. You never know about culture. You never know about, is a player going to figure it out? All sorts of reasons. I'm not here to talk bad about anybody, but not a huge surprise. But I did want to talk about it and mention it. The other one I wanted to talk about was Michigan. My goodness, man. We talk about who are the biggest thorns in Wisconsin's side for recruiting, right? We've talked a lot about Penn State. Sexton went there. They picked up a couple of Big Ten kids. Wisconsin's had a lot of battles with Penn State going both ways. But this cycle, Michigan has just been a pain in Fickell's side. Now, I think there's a silver lining with this. The fact that you're really getting into battles with Michigan, I think matters. Like that means you're picking the right type of guy, is what I would say. Now, there are no consolation prizes in recruiting. You don't get a ribbon for picking the right guy. You don't get to hang that up and say, it's fine. We picked the right guys. You got to start winning more of these battles against Michigan. But let's be honest, that's a program with a ton of momentum, right? Going to the playoffs, 2 straight wins over Ohio State. Harbaugh is a legendary, iconic coach. Michigan has a brand that Wisconsin, for whatever we want to say about Wisconsin's not on that tier as a brand. So it's going to be tough to win those battles against Michigan, but you got to find a way to win some of them, a few more of them, right? You're looking at some of the guys Michigan has beaten Wisconsin out at, and the latest one, Dominique Nichols was a 4-star edge. We talked about him, huge frame, 6'5", would have been a tremendous fit. He goes to Michigan. Marion Stewart, right? The receiver we talked about a ton, just a different type of guy. Brian Smith came on and said, these are the type of battles you have to win. You have to get the Marion Stewart to get Wisconsin to the next level. Goes to Michigan. Ben Roebuck was an offensive lineman that Wisconsin was in a good spot on early. Michigan. Jordan Marshall was like the first real huge running back target this staff went after, went to Michigan. So, yeah, Michigan has really beaten up on Wisconsin this recruiting cycle for whatever reason. And again, Michigan's going to beat up on most schools. Michigan's going to win more battles than they lose, especially to schools in a tier below them, which, again, if we're being honest, that's Wisconsin. And that's not even a knock. That's 98% of schools in FBS, right? Wisconsin, I've said it many times, Wisconsin is much more of a have than a have not in the college football landscape. Like, you ever see those scientific papers that have all the fish eating each other, right? There's the little minnow, and then there's the fish chasing the minnow, and the bigger fish chasing that fish, and the bigger fish, and it ends up at the great white shark or the orca, whatever it is, the apex predator. Like Michigan, Georgia, Bama, Ohio State, they're the apex predators. They're the orcas of the recruiting world. Well, Wisconsin is very much on that side of it. Wisconsin's like a mako shark or a barracuda or whatever it is, a muskie, right? So again, it's okay to acknowledge that some schools are just a tier above, because Wisconsin is a tier above most of the other schools, right? So Wisconsin is very much more of a have than a have not in the college football food chain, but they're not Michigan, and they got to start finding a way to win a few of these battles. You're not going to win half of them. You're not going to win most of them, but you got to win some of them. And it really stung to see Dominic Nichols go to Michigan. That was one of my favorite prospects this cycle. I thought he would be a difference maker on the defensive side. Marion Stewart, I just figured we weren't getting, but that's another one. Those are battles you have to occasionally win if you're Luke Fickell in Wisconsin. Now, I think going forward, let's see what Luke Fickell does on the field. And if he stacks a couple successful years, this is Michigan recruiting with all their hype and their momentum. That's probably not going to continue at that level. So this could even out a little bit, but it is worth noting. Pain in the butt this cycle, Harbaugh and the Wolverines. All right, we're going to pause there. Say thank you to everybody tuned in. Really do appreciate it. That's the show today. We got for all the everydayers, we got an awesome basketball show coming up. I believe it's tomorrow with a group of people. Something that's going to be kind of unique and fun. You're going to want to check that out. Brian Smith coming on later in the show or later in the week to talk more recruiting. We have a 24 football commit coming on the show later this week, hopefully. So a lot of good content coming your way as always on Wisconsin. Thank you for listening. Let's go.